What made me want to be a director? I didn't always want to be a director. I originally wanted to be a stage manager because I knew I wanted to be backstage or behind the scenes. I was quite organised, so I quite liked getting props and sorting out the stage and telling people where to be and at what time and all of that. So when I was at university, I was sort of volunteered to stage manage, what I thought was stage manage, various shows, and I was really interested by sitting next to a director, and then I gradually started to think, well, maybe I could do that. So when I was at university, I sort of took the plunge and tried directing, and that's it all came together. All my passions for theatre sort of came together in that role. Why did I want to do this piece? Well, this piece didn't really exist when I decided to do it. It was more a question of there were certain objectives that I wanted to achieve with a piece of theatre. I knew that I wanted to commission a piece around being a teenage girl. There was lots of news stories at that time around gender inequality and gender politics, and I was really interested as to what the reality was, and I also wanted there to be a celebration, which is quite hard because that's not very dramatic, so that was something we had to look at. I've always wanted to work with spoken word and performance poetry within playwriting, within theatre, and at that time I'd also come across Sabrina's work. It was a kind of voice that I was really, really keen to sort of bring into the repertoire of Theatre Centre. I approach rehearsals in, I imagine, probably how a painter approaches painting a picture. The subject matter, so my landscape is the script, the characters, and it's really looking at the understanding that and the composition of it. I probably start with sketching. So I sketch the piece on its feet to give everybody a broad outline on where they move, how they move, and through that we then talk through detail, not necessarily play the detail, but we talk through the detail amongst this sketch. Then as the actors become more familiar with the plotting and the sketching of it, we then look at the text in quite a fine detail, looking at the thoughts, the listening, the responding, the change of tactics that sort of come out as a consequence. And then in that final few days and through Tech Week, we zoom out again because I then like to think more closely about how the audience might be receiving the piece. I developed the script with Sabrina in various stages. So first of all, there was the stage where we talked through lots of ideas, what I was reading in the news, and we talked about how she responded to that as well. And then she suggested doing the survey, where she spoke through focus groups and through questionnaires to about 900 or so teenage girls about their hopes, their dreams, their role models, their fears. So using that material, she then wrote a sort of base text, which was a piece of prose, based on Layla. We then spent a week devising and building character, building family relationships, and building some of the sort of story elements. Sabrina, you took all that, so the survey, the prose, and then the sort of devising weeks of the scenes that we made, and she went away and she started writing the play. We spent another workshop and then another week sort of looking at the script, improvising out of the script to see where they're in places that needed more scenes or more character definition. And then in the final week of script development, we basically worked on the rehearsal draft of just so that she could look at what needed to be edited, what needed to be amended, what additions needed. What I would like young audiences to take from this production is, first of all, and all audiences, first of all, to recognise the situation that Layla is in, to recognise her story. If there are young women that have experienced a story similar to Layla's, that they realise that they're not alone, that this is something that is something that many young women may have experienced. If you're a young man in the audience, it's again also to recognise that this story happens within school, and to maybe find the empathy and the will to help young women, help the world change how people behave so these stories aren't so prevalent. Small little bad things that happen might be small to you, but to someone else they might be huge. That, you know, if you're receiving things happening to you, you might be receiving it in a much bigger way. Some of the techniques that we're using in rehearsal in the first week was developing characters. So we've used hot seating, physicalizing the characters through walking, and using that physicality then to sort of create the shape of the character, to moving that character onto a seat, and then sort of having the actor almost explore that character in the hot seat. We've also been using a lot of work around breath, because there's a lot of words. So one breath, one thought, and physicalizing the different thoughts, so moving to different spaces as the thoughts change. A technique called viewpoints, which is about how the actors move around in space. So so they're working around the spatial arrangement of the stage, but also have an awareness of each other, and that they can find their sort of complicity or their synchronicity through that. And that's been really, really interesting. I'm working with the different production elements in a way which I hope is very collaborative. When I received the script, there were no stage directions. So it's very challenging in that respect, because quite rightly, there is not a lot of clues on how to stage it. So I'm basically going into the text and trying to discover and explore and kind of impose quite a few staging conventions, trying to create a kind of scaffolding around the text, so that we can then I can talk to the sound and the lighting designer and the set designer and the costume, who's also doing costumes, and we can kind of say, well, that's the scaffolding. So what are the elements from these different production qualities that are needed to sort of give it sort of a third dimension? What do you do if you want to become a director? I think the most important things are to go and see lots of shows. Things that you wouldn't necessarily go and see because they're your taste, but go and see things that maybe aren't your taste, or you don't know anything about. See what surprises you. I would say get some mates together, maybe take a bit of text that you like, and just see what you can do with it. Don't worry about getting it right or wrong. Just see how you can manipulate the text in lots of different ways. Maybe use some of the ideas that you've seen in shows. Do it as much as you can as well, at whatever scale you can.